Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, your host, Jason Greenwood. I've got an amazing guest to introduce you to today, and he is Mr. Matt Harris from Harris Web Works out of Woodbridge, Connecticut. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Jason. Welcome. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to you. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today. We were talking about off-air, which I did not know until you told me that Connecticut is actually a pretty darn big hub of manufacturing in the United States, and you guys at Harris Web Works, and you're an agency, I'm sure you'll tell me all about it. You know, you work very heavily in the B2B space with manufacturers and distributors, and there's a lot of that activity happening in Connecticut, which until you told me, I had no idea that was the case. How did you come to be in the e-com space in the first place, and how did you decide that B2B was actually important in the e-commerce space?
Sure. Good question. I started in e-commerce in the 90s when I moved to New York City, fresh out of college, not knowing what I was going to do. I had a kind of a creative background, so I was educated in the creative arts and I could draw. So I actually got started doing animation. And the production company that I was working for, this was in 1995, when that first gig was up, because it was a freelance gig as an animator, I said, "Hey, do you have any more work?" And they said, "Do you know this thing called HTML?" And I was like, "No, not yet." So I basically started teaching myself then. And very quickly, that was a fairly big company, and they had big clients. So I immediately, like within the first 2 years of my career, was working with IBM and with Xerox and Museum of Modern Art and the New York Times. So my ascent into digital was fast. And then I got a job working with Gateway Computers in the 90s, who were like, if you were doing e-commerce back then, you were selling books or you were selling computer stuff, like parts and hardware. So that's when I got started. And we were building, I don't know how far back you go, but we were essentially building flat files with a Perl scripts and merging database configs with Perl scripts to generate like a 5,000 page website, because we didn't have caching mechanisms. Databases were slow as hell. So the only way to make a really fast user experience is to create a publishing tool that would publish flat files. So that's how far back I go. There was no anything. There was no platform. Everything was homegrown. So we built all of that from scratch, and we had about 20 people working on it, different departments. And then I just went out on my own after that, and I started all the old systems I had hands-on experience with. OS Commerce, ZenCard, Miva Merchant. I go all the way back to the old stuff. And then fast forward to the 2000s, late 2000s, I moved my family to Connecticut, and we retooled, started doing content management stuff, still some e-commerce on the side that was Miva Merchant. And then we decided we got some clients that were doing more complex e-commerce, and we had to build a lot of customizations and integrate with back office systems. And we've been doing it for a while, so there wasn't a lot of options. If you wanted to do complex e-commerce, we were becoming the go-to agency in Connecticut. And when I saw the landscape and what was happening, I basically decided I could go two directions. I could become an engineering heavy, back-end focused, integrated e-commerce company, or I could become a marketing agency. And I thought the back-end engineering support for a full stack model was more durable. And I felt like the marketing agency model was more here today, gone tomorrow. It was a lot more project-based. The retainers that you would get were based on sometimes subjective performance metrics, and you could very easily just lose a client for no fault of your own. And then, so basically it was like seeing where the direction of the market, knowing that B2B commerce was lagging B2C commerce. And that if I created a good business model where I was helping these older businesses modernize and build order flow into their existing systems and mapping to existing business rules, that there was a very long-term potential for a digital partner relationship. So that was about 15 where I made a hard pivot. And that's essentially how we got into Magento. And like Magento, for what we were trying to do, and for some of the solutions we were getting out the door, was the best platform in the market at that time, unless you wanted to do like completely custom proprietary like stuff. And then we've toyed around with all the other systems since. So we're fully aware of the reputation of Magento, fairly or unfairly, in the marketplace. I know that chatter. So we're essentially platform agnostic at this point. We have a lot of great case studies and solutions in Magento, but that's definitely not the only solution. We're playing around with Shopware, obviously Shopify. We've got some WooCommerce stuff that we've done. We'd like to get more experience on the BigCommerce platform, but we're also NetSuite certified. We do a lot of ERP integrations. So we do a lot of replatforming of businesses off of NetSuite e-commerce. And like for the size of company that we're going after, which is mid-market, which is essentially like 5 million to 500 million, sometimes on the lower end of that spectrum, they like having single agency service that can support their whole stack. And so we're trying to cultivate expertise where we can support, if they're going with what we call best-in-class current stuff, or they're willing to upgrade to current stuff like NetSuite, or we also do some OD work, then we can start to support their whole stack. And we do some HubSpot stuff and some Salesforce integrations, and we do a lot of API work, and we do data normalization, and we do PIM, where we're certified on Sales Layer. So we have the platforms that we built solutions around, but we're also agnostic. Like we have a Plitix, and we've worked with Akeneo. So we're not stuck in any platform, but what we're trying to do is build expertise in that whole integrated e-commerce space, and then allow clients to have a conversation with us on what direction they want to go with the platform solutions. But we're also, for the right size of business advocates of the somewhat decoupling, like you don't want everything in a single solution. I don't really believe that the single platform enterprise solution that hits on everything, e-commerce, CRM, ERP,
Doesn't exist.
It's not the way to go. You're going to get trapped. So it's good to keep things modular and see how the landscape evolves. Like the marketplace for solutions is going to get blown up in the next 5 years. So you have to be open to this. That was a great solution for 10 years, but now there's something that's so much better. And so we're going to invest in some small replatforming, but we don't have to take all of our business data and move it. We can just move one component. That's the consulting advice we give. Stay open, stay iterative, work on constant improvements, set your KPIs, make sure they're realistic, and find a good partner. And that's how you're going to become a sustainable model business.
Even as a consultant, that is largely the advice I give to my clients. And look, I worked in the agency space for many years, built and ran agencies for years, worked brand side for years. But interestingly, our experience is very similar. When I had my e-commerce pure play years and years ago, I built it on OS Commerce. And so that was my introduction. I was running and building an agency at that time, and we had an in-house SaaS platform, actually, one of the very, very first SaaS commerce platforms in the world. Actually, they didn't even call it SaaS. At that point, they didn't even use the term SaaS. It was just vendor hosted, basically, and versionless. But it was an early SaaS model. And then as an agency, we started building on OS Commerce because it was more powerful and it had more features and functions and capabilities to it that we didn't have to build out in-house, and it was being contributed to globally. And then after that, I started working with Magento in the very earliest days around 2008 and started getting embedded into the Magento ecosystem, became solution specialist certified on Magento 1. And it was it was a wild time to be alive
Yeah.
in the e-commerce game in those early days when everything was difficult. There was nothing easy about e-commerce in those days. We were building, I remember back in the earliest days, we were building entire websites from scratch in Flash. And
Oh, did a lot of Flash. Yeah, that's funny.
yeah. And I just remember Dreamweaver was one of the first web publishers I worked with. I remember when it was the battle between Dreamweaver and Front Page. Luckily, Front Page went the way of the dodo because they were creating such non-standard hacky HTML with of course Explorer extensions attached to it. And I remember the days of frames and how bad frames were and how it broke the URL structure of the internet, but it sped development up, and that's why people embraced frames. And oh my God, I just remember I almost had a trauma response when you started talking
Well, I
about some of
started
those
writing
early
HTML
stages of the
before there was
internet.
CSS.
Wow.
Like there was no style sheets, and
Yeah.
everything was in a table grid, fixed width table grid, TDs. I don't know if you remember that style. So we had to, I would say since I started, I've seen at least 4, probably 5 revolutions of tech that just changed how we had to do everything.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh, this again. Like we have to
Yes.
start over. That's the nature of the beast. And that's the learning that we had to suffer through to get the grit and sandpaper to have that discipline to say you can't rest.
Yes.
Every year you have to look again, fresh eyes, what's coming and adapt. And that's just unfortunately we don't get to dictate the playing field. We just have to play the game. Like, and that's the game.
Yeah, it certainly is. You have to stay current. And look, I went through the whole NetSuite days and absolutely love NetSuite as a ERP platform. I've actually implemented it inside of brands. I recommended it to a brand that I was working inside of, and we implemented it. So we transformed our entire company. We went from a local ERP to NetSuite, went from a local and custom built WMS to PeopleVox integrated with NetSuite. We replatformed everything. But I've also had to do solutioning on Odoo and D365 and a few other platforms, and then do system integration architecture with probably almost every major ERP out there at one point or another in my career. So I think you're absolutely spot on. And AI is the latest completely game-changing thing that is changing the way everybody does absolutely everything, from software development to implementations to theme building to absolutely everything. It's being changed by AI. But I want to hone in a little bit on the B2B side of your business, because I'm guessing that in the beginning you were heavily B2C and D2C focused. It sounds like you were anyway. And then obviously latterly you got an element of B2B religion in terms of servicing manufacturers and distributors with a more full stack solution, a fully integrated full stack solution, ERP as the beating heart of most B2B businesses, up the stack into the commerce layer, into the PIM layer, et cetera, which is still more common in the B2B world than it is in the B2C and D2C world. And so at what point did you realize, hey, at the same time we're trying to make our practice more durable by offering a more full stack, fully integrated commerce solution, at what point did you realize, hey, this B2B side of the commerce world is also a really durable side, because stuff still has to be made, stuff still has to be distributed. For retailers even to have anything to sell, stuff has to be made, stuff has to be distributed, stuff has to get out there into the market. And we feel like B2B is a place where we can win and we can help our clients to win.
Yeah. I think being digitally, I'm probably one of the oldest guys that's like digitally native. Like I'm old, but I started my career in the web space about as early as you could, 93, I think, but we were doing like AOL channels before I was doing the like early days of HTML stuff. So I had my prior biases about how the world worked, not really acknowledging how far ahead of things I was because of my work experience. And then I got to meet owners of older businesses. And I was like, wait, how are you doing this? And it made my brain explode. I'm like, okay. And then I looked at the numbers and I was like, this is trillions of dollars that's being transacted from businesses to businesses. And they're doing it through phone orders, through faxes, and purchase orders. They're going to trade shows. They have a ton of like sales overhead where, that's redundant, where they have to spread out these sales teams all over the country and you got to feed these people. And so much of this could be replaced through automation if you could figure out how to map to these older business rules, and you could satisfy an emergent buyer, which is like a new generation of buyer, which a lot of these older companies just were completely naive about. They didn't realize that they were selling to millennials. Their millennials were buying their stuff. The owners of the companies were boomers, but the people doing the work repetitively were millennials that were getting super frustrated. And I'm like the Gen X guy in between the two generations watching this. That's another dynamic that's going on, by the way, in legacy businesses. It's like you have massive generation shift, which is going to come on us like a sledgehammer. Like this is happening right now, but I think it's going to get more and more intense. And you're going to see a lot of businesses looking to exit because you've got boomer ownership that's ready to retire. You've got a millennial class that might not be mature enough to actually take ownership, right? And then you're like guys like me that are in between the two. So simultaneously, as technology is advancing like never before, AI is going to change the entire game. I believe the 5 biggest companies in America are being made right now. We don't even know what they are. And then you have this generation that's basically giving up the reins. So all of this is leading to a massive generational evolution in business. And so where I see like where we can help and where my heart is, how do you save these businesses? There's 30 to 40-year-old, 50-year-old. We have a client that's 100 years old. So how do you keep the lights on? Because these are not just businesses. These are families. These are communities of people. And there's a tech industry, corporatocracy, whatever the hell you want to call it, that wants all the chips. And I'm like, no, let's distribute the chips. Let's keep these businesses thriving. There's value they're bringing in the marketplace, getting this misunderstood. So anyway, not to pontificate on this, but like when I decided to go mid-market was for those reasons too. Like Connecticut has a lot of manufacturing. It's mostly small family businesses. It's 90% small family businesses. And so it's okay, how do you keep the lights on? How do you keep them surviving? How do you get some of these winners to thrive? Like some of the case studies we have are businesses that are just growing like crazy because they decided to invest. And they're just crushing their competition because they're like, one instance is a company that's a manufacturer of like custom apparel. And they don't sit on any inventory. We can call in orders from their suppliers through an API. They can get it in their manufacturing floor that day, and they can print it the next day and they can ship it out the door in 48 hours with no inventory. And it's a small business. And they have 170 web stores, and it's all on a single platform. So it's okay. These are solutions that's one instance, but I think with a technical partner, there's businesses out there where you can deliver something similar to meet exactly what they're trying to do, which is keep their customers happy.
I think what you said mirrors what even the major research companies are saying. Forrester famously put out a report at the end of 2024 saying that 71% of B2B buyers in the United States today are now either millennials or Gen Z.
So the
reality is over 70% now of the buy side of B2B are digital natives, right? So they're not expecting a sales rep to rock up and knock on their door. They're not necessarily going to trade shows. They're not looking in the yellow pages for a supplier. They're going to Google and they're typing in supplier, widget X, manufacturer, widget X, wholesaler, widget X, distributor, widget X.
Absolutely.
And they're starting their search for their next supplier of product online. And so the reality is if these family businesses, and I'm seeing exactly the same thing as you, which is that most of my merchant clients in the B2B world, the wholesale distributors and suppliers, they are overwhelmingly family businesses. And overwhelmingly, they are now in their second or third generation of family-owned leadership of that company.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of digital natives now starting to take leadership positions on the supply side, not just the buy side. And so we have these youngsters coming into their family businesses and going, they're digital natives themselves, and they're going, we do it how?
Right.
And they're going, why are we doing it this way? And why have we never looked at alternative ways of meeting the market where it is, instead of forcing our buyers to do things our way, why don't we meet them where they are instead? And would we sell more stuff if we did that? And they're going, this feels almost like we're running our business like we're in the age of the dinosaurs, right? And yet the parents and grandparents are saying, if it ain't broke, why fix it? And the kids are going, well, it may not be broke today, but man, we could be out of business tomorrow because our competitors who are digital natives are eating our lunch and we don't even realize it. And so these are the challenges that I think in the discussions that we're having every single day. But and I'd love to get your take on this. One of the reasons why I, after three-quarters of my career specializing in B2C and D2C, the reason why, especially once I started my independent consultancy, the reason why I wanted to double down on B2B is because when I look back across the entirety of my career, the most complex, the most fun, the most interesting, the most technically challenging projects I was involved in throughout that time were the B2B projects. They were the projects, and there is no, like in the B2C and D2C world, there are some very common design patterns that have emerged and have become common. And when you're at this stage of business, you start out with Shopify and Klaviyo and QuickBooks. And then when you grow a little bit bigger, maybe you replace QuickBooks with NetSuite. And then when you grow a little bit bigger, maybe you replace Klaviyo with a CDP. And then when you grow a little bit bigger, XYZ, maybe you put in a PIM system. And so those design patterns have become almost, I don't want to say boring, but certainly as a hardcore solution architect, they've become pretty standardized. And that side of the industry has all been taken over and run by the creatives. It's been taken over and run by the marketeers and the channel specialists. And that's fine. That's great. But for someone like me, who's more technical, the B2B side of the industry is far more challenging. It's far more interesting. There is much less standardization. Almost every single B2B operation you go into is different, from their tech stack to their ERP to their business processes to their sales cycles to just everything, like everything to the way that they do their manufacturing, the way they do their distribution, to supply chain. You go from, in the B2C and B2C world, you might have single parcels going out or single satchels going out. In the B2B world, now all of a sudden we got to think about cartons, pallets, and containers going out. And it's just a different world. And that is something that makes it super interesting, because no 2 days and no two clients are alike.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as a technologist or a solutions architect or whatever the hell I am, I'm a business owner that has a service business. Where I get the most personal reward is where I feel like we're really helping people. No, this is a different business now as a result of the last 3 years of effort that we put into slightly different. Like we're not, but so at the end of the day, you want to feel like you're doing something that you're good at, that there's real value in what you're doing, and that these businesses are benefiting from their partnership with you, which I like to call it a partnership. They have to pay us, but we're delivering as much value back to them as they're paying us. If not, I would feel horrible about it. And so in that way, it is a partnership, and you have 25 people with different expertise that are trained to do specific things really well. And a lot of these SMB businesses, they can't staff those 25 people. It would be a waste, actually. And I also think that should be the mindset moving forward. It's the advancement of your technology in order to keep pace with a very rapidly changing world needs to be considered on a quarterly, at least annual basis. And that you should look at a customer-centric view of how you're improving things. And that overhead to support that technology is baked in, just like paying rent or payroll, right? Like the business owners have to realize this is not a one-time investment, right? And I think the older generation really struggles with that. And that's where you see a lot of friction. They're like, okay, we're going to upgrade our systems. How much is that going to cost? Give me a finite number, and then we can just walk away. And you're like, no, it's not going to work that way. And they do not want to do that. And I think that's where a lot of the struggle is right now. But anyway, to answer your question, I think it's probably the same conclusion you came to, right? Which is, where can I help the most? And I think that's...
Well, I also looked out at the market and I said to myself, what is red ocean and what is blue ocean left in our space where I can actually win as a business owner as well. And I was looking out there and I'm going, every agency and their dog is a D2C agency. Every solution architect and their dog is a D2C specialist. Every solution architect, every platform vendor, everything, they all seem to be orientated largely around the B2C and D2C world. That's their orbit. And that's what they know the best. That's where the marketers run the show. And I felt sure I could try to just be another e-commerce consultant in that world, which is almost impossible to differentiate yourself in. And you're just going to it's going to be a race to the bottom in terms of what you can charge and how you can specialize and the value that you can bring. It's become very standardized. And I thought, why would I do that when I have experience in B2B? I've got a specialization in B2B. It's the stuff that really excites me. And because I've always had a little bit of overlap with marketing in the sense I understand the intersect of marketing and business and innovation and sales and channels, et cetera, and channel mix. But I also am a much more technical, so I'm a highly technical non-developer. So I'm not a developer, but I can read API documentation. I speak the language of developers. I've worked with developers my entire career, and I'm a solution architect. So I have to put it in terms that developers can actually understand and deliver on. And I just looked out at the market and I thought, why would I go into a completely red ocean space when over here is a totally blue ocean space where there's not that many specialists, where there's not that many people that understand the entirety of the commerce stack, where I can go in and I can actually solution and scope their ERP. I can go in and I can solution their CRM. I can go in and I can solution for PIM and CDP and system integration and commerce and all these other components, OMS, IMS, WMS. I understand all those things because I've actually implemented those things as a brand before. And so I haven't just been a theorist. I've also been a doist inside of brands. And I understand what that entire process and all of the required change management that goes along with it looks like when you're trying to drag a business kicking and screaming into the 21st century. And for me, it became an absolute no-brainer to double down on the B2B world, because it was a specialization that was not only interesting, but that was crying out for help.
Yeah.
That industry is just absolutely begging for modernization. And oftentimes, like you said, they don't even know what they don't know. They don't even know what's possible through automation. They don't even know what's possible through digital channels. They just have no idea. When I go in and I start talking to sales teams that maybe, for example, are originally really resistant to change because they're going, oh, so you're going to implement a machine that replaces me?
Yeah.
No, I'm not interested. And it's actually, no, I want to give you guys superpowers. And I also want to take away all the shitty admin stuff that you hate doing as a sales rep. I want to take that away. I want to take that away from you because it doesn't add to your commission and it doesn't make your customer experience any better either. And so let's make this a win-win across the business, the customer, and the owners. And that's when we start to see real traction. And that's where it becomes, I think, not only are you presenting value to the supplier, but you're getting a lot more fulfillment out of the industry at the same time. And you're getting a lot more fulfillment out of what you do. And is that something you've experienced as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just right. You're solving problems, like you said, that sometimes they think they don't know that's a problem. Second, they know it's a problem, but they don't know how to fix it. Sometimes they think they can't fix it. And so once you are able to fix these problems and they see the results, it's really gratifying. And that's where you get loyalty. Like that idea of partnership, what we want to do is we want to be in the conversation with them every time they're thinking about making an improvement. We want to be trusted. And that's where I think where we're delivering a lot of value, and that's where we get the most satisfaction. Also, like a fringe benefit of that process and getting into those deeper solutions that you've like with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and months of work. Once you get them over the finish line, one of the fringe benefits from the agency standpoint is you've actually cleared a hurdle that's a barrier to entry to most startups. Like you can't come into this industry and just get into a project like that right away. So now, I think if I understand your analogy of the blue ocean, red ocean, you're putting yourself more into the blue ocean, right? Because there's a lot of people that don't know how to do this. This case study is incredible. And that's what we're trying to do as well. is build out those really complex case studies. And then with data and where we're trying to get to, I tell my team, the goal, the North Star is to finish the loop. Like you've got digital transformation, you've got the businesses off of these, if you can get them off of these antiquated on-prem systems and get them into modern systems, or even a modern on-prem system, but whatever. Like you get their data flowing really well. You've got the data normalization piece done. You got your PIM in place. You got your order flow coming in. You've integrated the marketing data. You've integrated the sales teams. You've integrated operations, shipping, financial, all the people. Now, can you complete the loop and start to look at storing all the business data in a central repository and building AI models to make the business smarter and faster? And if you can get to that down the road, then you're talking about like really smart businesses. Then that's a heavy lift. And then again, you have to keep working at it. You can't just like rough out the world.
And I've witnessed another change start to emerge over the last 12, maybe 18 months, really 12 months in with momentum. And that is the advent of AI has greatly expanded the ways that we can engage with B2B buyers, both transactionally and from a digital services layer perspective. And let me explain what I mean. And I just want to see if you're witnessing a similar sort of evolution. So historically in B2B, the three main digital sales channels, or four, depending on if you include marketplaces in that, is punch out, e-procurement, /EDI / self-service e-commerce. Those are the three primary digital sales channels we encounter in the B2B world that we need to be able to support. But that, in many cases, requires, at least from a self-service e-commerce perspective, for the smaller buyers, for example, that requires them to change their process. That requires them to come into your digital system to complete a transaction, which is great for you as the seller, but maybe not so great for them. Now, in some instances, you'll have a cohort of your buyers that really want to do that. And they want to self-service at all hours of the day and the night, and they want to come in and they want to place the transaction. They want to do searches. They want to find products. They want to see their MOQs. They want to see their buying increments, their unique price list. They want to see all that stuff, and they want to be able to self-service all that. And you will have a growing percentage of your buyers that want to do that. However, there are some other channels that historically have not been automated that B2Bs have operated in for probably at least a decade. And those are channels like WhatsApp, those are channels like email, those are channels like Slack, those are channels like Teams, where those are the channels that those buyers love to communicate with Joe or Sally, my account manager over at XYZ supplier or XYZ distributor or XYZ manufacturer. I send Bob an email with my PO attached, which is a PDF, and they just get it into the system for me. They just enter it into the ERP and it gets fulfilled. Or when I want to quote, I send Bob a WhatsApp message. Hey, can you give me a quote on this thing? And I need 1,000 pieces of it. Hey, how much is it? And when can you ship it out? And I send them a message. They do all the work. And then they send me a quote back via WhatsApp. And I tell them, sure, go ahead. Here's the PO number to assign to the order. And they just magically get it into the system for me. I don't want to change the way I do things. Maybe I'm out on a freaking building site and I'm on my phone and I need some products for my building site for this job I'm on. And I'm not in front of a computer. I'm not in front of a laptop. And I just want to message on Slack my account manager and get this thing on the way. Or I want to do a live chat to customer service or whatever it is. And with AI, what we're seeing now is not only are e-commerce platform vendors starting to automate those interactions across those legacy channels, those legacy comms channels like email, they're able to grab the PDF or they're able to grab the CSV that's attached to the email or grab the information from the message in WhatsApp, convert those into sales orders, map them into the commerce system, and then automate that entire process end to end for both the buyer and the seller. And this is a change. This is a major sea change that I am witnessing happen real time, just as big as the shift of mobile was to our industry, the shift to mobile. This is becoming a thing. So instead of expecting our buyers to meet us where we are, we're meeting them where they are. Yeah. So they have to change almost nothing about the way they interact with us, but yet we're automating as much as we can.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, I would say I might not be seeing as much as you are on that, but I could definitely see, I'm just thinking of a couple instances where I talked to the CTO of this company last week and he was explaining their struggles and some of their problems. And I think that this is also where your thinking is probably aligned with mine, I'm sure, is that tech vendors sometimes become obsessed with the solution, and we should really become obsessed with the problem. Like, where's the friction? And also, let's not come in the door without listening first and say, oh no, this solution is going to solve all your problems. We don't even know what our problems are. Like, you're assuming. And like you said, all these B2Bs are different. So the problems are not necessarily all the same. Now, of course, you have tools in your toolbox that you can reuse, but you got to make sure that they need a hammer and not a screwdriver. Like, you got to listen, right? So one of these companies is a manufacturer regionally. I was talking to the CTO last week, and he's, can you help us on this? And I'm like, yeah, let's dig in. Very regulated industry, by the way. So that's
another layer in B2B, especially
huge
regulated is a whole
stuff.
other thing.
Yeah, big
compliance,
Yep.
all that stuff.
And so we have storage on these like tapes. Let's just think of it as like an old micro tape. And then
Yep.
we have a manufacturing system, an MRP. We have an ERP. And then we have a separate homegrown inventory system. And so whenever we're inbounding stuff and wherever we're shipping stuff out, we have to make sure that 4 different systems, many of which were homegrown, many of which are very old, are synchronized. And there's no automation. So we're doing these like repetitive manual inputs, right? And I say, okay, have you thought about trying to install agents that can automate some of this process? And so there you go, right? Like, we haven't started that work, but I could definitely see like that happening this year. And we come in and you crawl, walk, run, you plant a seed, and you're like, did that help you? Yeah, oh my God, that saved us hundreds of hours. Okay, let's do another small, but yeah, totally. I think the platform agnostic stuff is a way of saying, like, I've been in this world long enough. I know what the solutions are, and I can get anybody in front of you. They're all, the salespeople are not shy. They love to talk to you. You get a free demo. I could set you up with 20 free demos if that's what you want, but let's listen to what the problems are first. And then let's make sure, oh no, like, sorry, Shopify won't work. There's these 3 things blocking you. You don't want to do it, like, so, or whatever that is. Yeah, definitely.
And how are you thinking about channel proliferation in the B2B world? And let me just share what I mean by that. So B2B marketplaces, B2B specific marketplaces are still, according to D360 data, DC360 and a few other research firms, are still the fastest growing channels in the B2B world, for bar none. But even before a major manufacturer or distributor starts to think about, should we be in these B2B marketplace channels or not, some of them haven't even maximized the opportunity to be in channels where some of their customers already are, but they can't penetrate those channels because they don't meet those customers' requirements to be a preferred supplier to them. And I'll give you an example. So lots of manufacturers and distributors don't do punch out. They just don't offer it. They don't have a punch out middleware tool. They can't get listed in major e-procurement systems as a result. They don't have a digitalized catalog. So even if they did have a punch out system or middleware platform, they have nothing to plug it into except maybe their ERP. And so their data isn't really ready to be exposed on a one-to-many basis to these new digital channels. E-procurement's certainly not new. Jagger and Coupa and Ariba, et cetera. These platforms have been around for, in some cases, decades in the B2B world, but it's a whole new world, especially for smaller manufacturers and distributors. And you said yourself, some of these are family businesses. They're maybe $20 to $100 million a year family businesses. They might be 50 years old, 75 years old. They haven't even heard the term e-procurement. They haven't even heard the term punch out. They're like, punch out, is that a video game? They don't even know what that is, right? And yet via their salespeople, they're now starting to get requests from certain buyers and say, look, unless you can give us a digital catalog via a punch out and integration with our e-procurement system, we can't get you onto our supplier list. We can't even vet you to become a preferred supplier unless you can meet us in our system of choice that we do all of our procurement through, because we need procurement automation on our side. And sometimes when you explain it to them like that and you say, look, this is an entirely new channel, a new business opportunity for you that you cannot unlock without technology. You can't, this is one thing you can't do manually. You have to do this through technology. Otherwise, the buyer will not buy from you. And sometimes when you put it in that context, they go, wow, I never knew that. I never knew that channel was available to me if only I implemented smart technology to unlock it. And sometimes their eyes light up and they're going, what? You mean our sales person could go out and create this relationship once? We get on the preferred supplier list, we integrate with their e-procurement platform of choice, and we become the default supplier of this range of products? Sign me up. But they just don't know what's possible, and they don't even know those channels are available to them until you show them that it's available to them. That must be super rewarding when you're having those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, like, we're doing a PIM solution right now for a company manufacturer, because the suppliers, the distributors are saying, you have to get us this data formatted for our system. Otherwise, you can't send us Excel files. We're not going to do that anymore. And that was like a wake up call. And then we're working with a company that has a solution on Ariba. And I was like, that was new to me. It was very kind of enterprise, and it's in industries that we are not in. Like, it was a lot of healthcare and hospitals and stuff in it. And then I read, there's $1 trillion transaction on that platform. But I'm like, what? What?
These are not small numbers.
I'm like, whoa. And they're like, yeah, it's like you plug in products as a manufacturer or supplier into the procurement platform. And then these buyers just start buying from you. Obviously, it's not news to you, but I think it's news to a lot of people. A lot of particularly smaller businesses, and they're not aware of how that works, which is, yeah.
Well, and I think the procurement model, for example, if you want to get into government, if you want to supply to government, or you want to supply to universities, or you want to supply to buying groups, for example, or co-ops and things like that, like if you want to get into those opportunities and you want to pitch on those RF and you want to become a preferred supplier in those environments, I think this is super exciting, especially for small and medium-sized manufacturers and distributors. I think just having these kind of conversations and just getting this out into the world so that they can hear that there are opportunities out there that they're not even aware of to sell their products into more places. And the great thing, like you said, is in many cases, it's simply you have to turn up there. You don't have to sell, quote unquote, sell into those channels. You don't have to go out and pitch into those channels. You just have to be visible in those channels for those buyers to even know you exist as a supplier in that vertical or in that category of products, and you're automatically going to make sales by default just because you are where your customers are. And I think we have preached for many years, and I know you have too, that in the B2C and D2C world, you have to be channel agnostic, because today's social selling is tomorrow's marketplace selling, was yesterday's D2C website selling. So the reality is you cannot become wedded to any one channel and get really good at that and expect that to be your entire business model and your entire channel mix forever, because where your customers like to buy is going to change. And if you're not there, you're going to die. You're going to no longer be relevant to your customers in that environment. And who would have thought 5 years ago that TikTok Shop would be one of the top sales channels for D2C and B2C brands? Who would have thought that? Nobody would have thought that, right? And who would have thought that these small brands in the United States, for example, would literally be up in arms at the thought of TikTok shutting down because 80% of their revenue comes through TikTok Shop? I see the same thing emerging in the B2B world, where these B2B suppliers must start to become much more channel agnostic than what they are today, and set in their old ways and their old ways of getting into new markets. Because I tell you, if they don't become more channel agnostic, and their tech stack, which has historically been super rigid and super hard to get into new channels, if they don't become more flexible in their tech stack and become more channel agnostic in their thinking, then they're simply not going to be relevant to the B2B buyers of tomorrow. And that means they're probably not going to be around. Yeah. And so it's these conversations, we have to preach channel agnosticism just as much in the B2B world as we do in the B2C world.
Yeah. And also it's like opportunity ready. Like there might be a channel that's a huge opportunity for you, but are you ready? And I think that, yeah. And readiness it's somewhat universal. If you can be channel agnostic, but you're channel ready, now you can push it out to different channels. And I think that's what we're preaching too. No, you have to have your data organized. You have to have it centralized. You need to have a single source of truth, and you need to be able to push out these different channels. And that can be on the B2B, and it can even be on the B2C side, like a lot of the manufacturers we're working with. That's the humbling experience where you spend 40 years sending your products out to distribution, and you've got your sales reps, and you're just sitting in your factory churning out product, and it goes out the other end of your factory, and someone picks it up, and you're done. There's no customer relationship with the end customer. You're just building a nice quality product, and you let your sales and distribution become client-facing, customer-facing. Now, these customers, these businesses are like, okay, I want to sell direct. I'm a little worried that the market's changing. And then you're okay. So do you have customer service? Do you
have live chat? Do you have
people? You got to be nice.
Yeah.
To
Do you have any of that stuff?
Right. So that's a big uphill battle when you're trying to go D2C as a manufacturer. But my point is, I think that kind of flexibility is that's where everyone's going. It depends on the business, but I think that you can go through multiple channels and they can be both B2C and D2C, or B2B and D2C. And that's what I would do. If I was manufacturing some kind of contractor grade product, I'm like, yeah, I sell through distribution. There's still a lot of old mom and pop plumbing distributors out there, but then put it up on Supply House, put it up on Plumbing and More, sell it direct.
Put it up on Amazon Business.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. And then if the value proposition of one of those channels starts to diminish, you've got these other channels to help support you so you can move things around. And that we're doing a lot of that measuring. That's where the marketing piece comes in. It's not like we don't do marketing. We're like, marketing comes in after you've got the machine built. Do you have the order flow? Do you have the shipping piece done? All of that. And product data, the stuff that we've encountered probably over the last few years, the product normalization process is massive. It can be massive.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of companies are like, why does my sorting and filtering on my site not work? Because your data is garbage.
You don't have any structured data.
You have no structured data.
You got some long descriptions, and that's all you got.
I know.
What do we
and
do
I'm like, how are you still in business? I do not understand how you're still in business. But anyway, that's where, and again, there's so much work still to be done. There's still to be done, like in the B2B space. I think people are shocked. The younger generation is shocked, I think, when they learn how the older generation is still doing business. And they're still in control. They're still in management and ownership positions in pre-digital
dinosaurs.
But, and I don't know what your experience.
They're aging out fast. Aging out fast.
Mergers and acquisitions.
Totally.
What do you think? Like, I see that a tsunami hormone. Consolidation.
It's called they call it the silver tsunami.
Yeah.
That's what they call it.
Yeah. And I'm seeing that happening. And I'm also like, and you're probably thinking the same way for your consultancy. I'm thinking the same way for my agency, is we're ready. If you're private equity or venture capital and you want to bundle up a bunch, come talk to us. You want to bundle up these companies, you want to put them on a single platform, you want to streamline operations, you want to streamline data flow, and you want to go multi-channel, and you want to come talk to us. That's where I see us being very well positioned. And I think a lot of our solutions are ready for that. Yeah, I think that's coming big time. I don't know if you're seeing that too on your side.
I am. I'm not seeing I'll tell you what I'm seeing grow at a faster rate is traditional B2C and D2C agencies realizing that they missed the B2B train, or they're about to miss the B2B train, and they're coming to me and they're saying, hey, we need to start doing B2B. We don't know where to start. We don't know which platforms to specialize in. We don't know the language the B2Bs use. We don't know the tech stacks that they use. We don't know how to do solution architecture in the space. We have no credibility. We're known as a B2C or D2C agency, and we don't know how to break in to that world. And so I'm seeing a lot more demand for my services, helping to consult to agencies to expand their offering into the B2B world and having credible conversations, or They have a cohort of their D2C merchant customers that they're already working with that are saying, hey, can you help us establish B2B channels? But we don't know how to do that. Can you come in and help us solution around that? Maybe it's even on B2B on Shopify Plus, for example. Can you help us understand what the drawbacks are, what the opportunities are, what that looks like? But yes, I'm seeing a smaller cohort than that of investors, VCs, and private equity that are coming to me and saying, we know how to do due diligence in the B2C and D2C world. We can do that. We can run the numbers. We can do our due diligence. They can give us a data room and we can see whether they're investable, whether they're a distress asset, whatever, what the market opportunity looks like, what the marketing opportunity looks like. We can do all that, but we have no idea how to do due diligence on a B2B business. We just don't know how to do that. And if we were looking to buy one of these small manufacturers or distribution businesses or something like that, or maybe try to do a little bit of a roll up like a Thrasio model or something like that, we don't know where to start with that. Can you help us? Can you help us go in and vet where these businesses are at, what the opportunity looks like, and then what it's going to cost us to modernize them? Can you help us do that due diligence? Because we don't have that capability in-house. And that, I think, is an emerging opportunity that is going to gain steam over the next 12, 18, 24 months as the silver tsunami starts to really hit some of these large private equity pools of funds, sovereign wealth funds, et cetera. As they start to get B2B religion, just like you and I have, that's going to be an emerging opportunity that I think is super exciting for those of us that have been working in this space for a long time, to be able to give them the firepower of due diligence that they just can't do on their own.
Yeah. And I think the smart money is going to understand the difference. Like, I hate digital transformation as a term, but I don't know what else to use. But businesses that are, and you and I would agree that it's not like it's a process, not a destination. There's people that on the spectrum are farther down the road. And I think the smart money is going to understand that. Your evaluations are going to be much lower if you're a laggard. And I think your evaluations, so there's a flipper opportunity in just like bundling up these laggard businesses, these kind of boomer businesses, and saying, we're going to modernize these businesses. We're going to create a new customer experience. We're going to become digitally transformed. We're going to get into these marketplaces where we see opportunities. We're going to buy a bunch of similar types of businesses, merge them, and then get the efficiency gains, get the marketing gains, get the sales gains, for getting into these different marketplaces, and then flip it. Like, I can see a lot of that happening. And it's the other thing is, like, there's a type of investor that's technological, that's roll your sleeves up, who wants to do some of this work. But they're very rare. Then there's the other group of investors that are like, talk to me when you hit 100 million. And those are most of them. They're moving chips. They're not technological. They're not like thinking about the details of how to do the hard work. They're like, what are the margins? Like, they're looking at purely from a financial standpoint. And if you can take a bunch of businesses and work with some of those angel investors or those hardworking investors and then move them up into this other class to buy, that I think there's a ton of money to be made there, which I think is like super interesting. And
it is.
You can save the businesses. Like, the laziness sometimes I find overwhelming. Like, the work is hard, yeah, but the value is there, and you're going to save these businesses. You're going to save these communities, which is what a business is. It's communal people. Like, that part I find, there's a financial class of people in this country, which, and I know them, and I think that their intentions are good, but they sometimes miss the point that these are human beings. Like, these businesses are people, and that they're worth saving. Having a family we're manufacturers. I am a 4th generation business owner. Both my grandfathers had manufacturing businesses in the Rust Belt. They're gone. They're gone now. They didn't have to be gone. I think there was a lot of factors. When we see Connecticut's a manufacturing hub for a lot of defense spending, a lot of military stuff, Sikorsky's here, and Pratt & Whitney, and Electric Boat, and then there's all the weapons and gun manufacturing, just tons of that here. But those are primarily mom and pop businesses, like I was saying. And when this big push to offshore manufacturing happened, this communities got destroyed. Like Detroit. And my heart goes out to those communities, and I'm like, we don't have to repeat that. We don't have to. That was a choice.
We can learn our lesson.
That was a choice. I'm like, let's not be lazy. Let's roll our sleeves up and let's retool these businesses. It's like restoring an old home. That has a lot of character, It's got a lot of value. It's in a really cool part of the city. You don't have to tear it down or build condos, man. That's
Or restoring an old car or whatever,
right. Exactly.
let's just put some love back into it. Listen, mate, this has been I've really enjoyed this conversation. An hour has absolutely flown by.
Sorry, Tucker. I'll shut up.
No, I love it too.
Yeah.
I love it too. I'm not complaining in any way, shape, or form complaining. I think this has been so insightful, so enlightening. I've really enjoyed it. You clearly know your stuff. You're clearly passionate about what you do. You're clearly passionate about helping these businesses not only survive, but also thrive moving into 2025 and over the next decade. I'm really glad I got a chance to meet you and have this conversation. Now, where's the best place for people to find you? I'll drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and your website in the show notes. But other than that, if people, manufacturers or distributors out there want to have a conversation with you about modernizing their businesses to take advantage of the opportunities in 2025 and beyond, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, go to harriswebworks.com. That's our website. You can search that. We're on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Matt Harris at Harris Webworks. And Verato's our podcast, so we're talking the talk on that channel, Verato.com. You can find us on the podcast. I'm hoping that you can join me on my podcast. So I want to make it more about Jason and less about Matt on the next one. So that'll be cool. But yeah,
I look forward to it. I love pod swaps like that.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to be a guest on your podcast as well. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script, hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. So, Mr. Matt Harris from Harris Webworks, what is your question for me today?
Are we going to see more diversity in AI, and is DeepSeek just the tip of the iceberg?
Yes, I think it's an open question still where this all shakes out or how this all shakes out. But I've seen 3 or 4 pretty significant tech revolutions in my last 25 years in this industry, like complete shakeups. The move to mobile was completely transformational to our industry. It broke a lot of businesses. It made a lot of businesses. It changed the way we do things forever. And I see AI as no less than completely transformational, but I think there are some things that are going to take a lot longer to get there than what we think today. There's other things that are going to come real quick. I've seen improvements in Gen AI happening already. It is the classic case of garbage in, garbage out, and there's a lot of detritus on the internet that these agents and these large language models are learning off of. And you've got quality ranging from the best quality and the most accurate information all the way down to complete horse crap on the internet and everything in between. And so what does that mean? It means that AI is training on a range of quality of data, that some of it is very good and some of it is very bad. I think where we're going to start to see some real traction is agentic AI. I think that's a thing. I think it's going to become a thing. I think we mix that with humanoid robots that can come into our world as it was engineered for human beings with 5, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and they can start physically working in our spaces to where the spaces don't have to be re-engineered. The machinery doesn't have to be re-engineered. Our entire world doesn't have to be re-engineered. If we pair agentic AI with humanoid robotics, then all of a sudden we start to get to a world that can automate much more rapidly than maybe if we have to transform the entire world to work with the machines, basically. Yeah. And so I think there's some really cool stuff coming there. But I think in many respects, especially with AI hallucination and other issues that are still a major problem, because AI can sound completely believable. And sometimes when you do your homework, you go, that's not accurate. That's not correct. That's not true. Yeah. And do I think that it's going to be transformational in the long term? 100%. Do I think the value of it has been overblown in the short term? 100%. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I've started a completely separate AI company with a friend of mine to do some AI and automation consulting in the world. So do I think it's a thing? Absolutely. Do I think it's going to take us a little while to see what that looks like? Yes.
This reminds me a little bit of .bomb, which I'm old enough to have lived through. So 2000, yes. Where the Y2K stuff. There was a moment in 2000 where people were like, maybe this whole internet thing is overblown and it's just a bunch of hot air. Yeah.
Maybe it's not a trend. Maybe it's a fad.
Yeah, it's just vapor. It's just a fad. It's going to go away. Like, we're going to go through that same arc. We're like, oh, this is like, this doesn't do anything. And the technologists like you and me have been like, I got a little gray in my beard. And I'm like, yeah, you wait. You just wait. But I will be the first to admit, because I've lived through it a few times, is I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years. I know it's going to be dramatically different. the equivalent of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, they're working in their garages right now. Their dorm rooms
Totally.
right now. And you're going to see some stuff that's going to blow your mind. And we don't know what it's going to look like. And I find that really exciting. It's scary. I'm an optimist at heart, and I think it's going to be, anyway, not to answer your question for you, Jason.
No, I love it. I love it. I love the feedback. I love the banter. I love the interaction. I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Have a great day,
Right
my
on.
friend.
Yeah, you too. Thanks a lot.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.